Please continue. No, you've heard that one before. Hey, but thank you so much for having me here this morning. I'll try to get this wrapped up in the next 3 or 4 hours, so I really appreciate your time. Well, you said you got about 20 minutes to speak about something really brilliant. I'm going, oh my gosh, do I have something to say brilliant? But we shall see. So what I want to do is just share with you guys just a story, hopefully that you'll be able to relate to, or at least be able to put into your life in some aspect. So I'm a local guy. I was born here in Hampton. I was raised in Yorktown. I built a house in Newport News. I've been there ever since. So I'm here with you guys. I actually founded the publishing house here in Newport News. Now 14 years later, we're still here. And we were talking earlier about our employees. We got 43 people that work with us, I always like to say. So we're in the groove here with you guys. But let me tell you my story. So when I started this, I won't go back to birth, but I was actually a banker here in Hampton Roads in the 90s. And you know, I barely passed high school. I did just enough to get by. Don't tell anybody I said that. I ended up dropping out of college because I just didn't quite see the relevancy of it. But when I ended up becoming a banker, I realized I didn't need the college education for that career, and they were paying us stupid money. In fact, when I was teasing with Mr. Kuntz here earlier, that they were paying us such crazy money for people that didn't have any formal education, it was like almost ridiculous. No wonder it all kind of crashed and burned. But I was a mortgage banker, and I was really having fun. I was fat, dumb, and happy, didn't ever imagine doing anything else, and I was having the time of my life. It was really fun. But I was probably not unlike some of you guys. I was literally competing with 1,000 people offering basically the same product and service that I had. And that was really true in banking. There might be dozens and dozens of banks, lots of different little mortgage offices, but we all basically sell the same thing. So you really had to stand out. For whatever reason, I was having some success with standing out. But it wasn't because I had an unlimited ad budget. I mean, literally, the bank I worked for, I could spend anything in any amount as long as I could even remotely call it marketing. And for me, that was fun, but I realized really quickly it just didn't work. It just didn't work as well as maybe trying to create some value and create some relationships and try to help others achieve their goals. I learned those really quickly. But it was an interesting environment. And to try to stay on top, I had to stay ahead on what I could do as far as, you know, sales and marketing or business, you know, acumen. And it was really challenging. But I was a hungry learner, so I had to, again, I worked for, he's still a friend, but I worked for a guy who just put up with me because I was a top producer. He said, do whatever you need to do, buy whatever you need to buy, go anywhere you need to go. So of course I said, sure, sign me up for that. So I went to all the seminars, I went to all the, you know, the courses, whether it was industry specific or not. I attended things not unlike this, although we didn't have anything as wonderful as this back then. But I went to, you know, Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, I went to Todd Duncan, I went to Bill Backrack. Whether it was industry specific or not, it didn't make a difference. I was just hungry to learn what I could do to grow my business and grow me, you know, professionally. And it was really fun. I really enjoyed it. It was like lots of travel time, lots of studying, and I know it. And I'm a good implementer, so I would come back and I would implement the things that I had learned, which is the most important thing. So you can go out there and study everything. You can read every big book out in the world, but unless you do something with it, it's a waste of your time. So I came back and I implemented. I hired assistants, I fine-tuned processes, and sure, I earned a little bit more money, and I was able to go home from work maybe an hour-ish earlier, but nothing really gave me that impact in my career that I was looking for. And I didn't necessarily really even know what I was looking for. I just knew that I hadn't had it yet. So I was like, gracious, what more can I do? So I continued my path to try to find all these education pieces, all these reading opportunities, business opportunities. And in the 90s, a lot of great names were coming up and really teaching us some really great things, but I was still lacking. But it wasn't until I discovered a specific book that ended up changing my life and ultimately ended up changing my career, which wasn't what I expected and may or may not have an impact on you guys, but I'll tell you what it was. Has anybody ever heard of the term guerrilla marketing? I'm sure you guys all have. It's about doing unconventional things to gain conventional goals. Well, I had never heard of it. And guerrilla marketing in the 90s, when I discovered it, it was already in its 3rd edition, had already sold 15 million copies. And again, I never heard of the author, J. Conrad Levinson, never heard of the book or the concept, but I got a copy of the book. It's funny because I really don't remember where the book came from. I don't know if a friend gave it to me. I don't know if I stole it. I'm pretty sure I didn't steal it, but somehow it landed on my desk. I call it divine intervention, but it was on my desk one day and I read it. And I realized, wow, I was a guerrilla and just didn't know it. I was leveraging my time, my energy, and my imagination instead of the unlimited ad budget that I had. So I was leveraging those things to grow the business that I had. So I really resonated with guerrilla marketing. And in the book, it really didn't teach me any more than I was already doing, but in the book, the author had an opportunity for me to reach out to him to try to take it further, which is a great thing to do. A lot of great business books back in the 90s taught us really good stuff, but the authors were nowhere to be found and there's no way to access them. So this is really an important part of my career now. So I reached out to the author and hired him as a coach. $10,000 a month later, he ended up teaching me nothing more than I had already learned from the book. which could be a little bit frustrating. But he ended up confirming the things that I knew was right. So that was very valuable. But he ended up taking it one step further, and this is the point that I want to make with you guys. He said, and he dragged this out, of course, because he's a business person. He said, David, if you wanted to charge more and negotiate less for your products and services, you've got to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. And I'm like, well, sure, who doesn't want to charge more and negotiate less? And wouldn't you guys like to just double your fees and stop having people argue with it? I mean, yeah, sign me up for that. But he said, you need to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. I'm like, yes, he's going to give me the secret. What is it? Well, he didn't tell me right away, of course. And then he went on to say, David, if you wanted to have those whale of a clients, those big names that you wish you could do business with, if you wanted those guys and gals to start banging on your door, begging you to give them your business, you've got to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. And I'm like, Jay, I'm ready. Tell me this stuff. And of course, he didn't tell me yet. He wanted to drag it out a little bit more. But he's right. I mean, I had clients in the banking business, those big builders, those big real estate agents that I just wanted, if I could get their business, man, my life would be great, I think we all have those clients that we wish we could have or we wanted to have. And so I wanted that, but he still didn't tell me what it was. So I was getting pretty frustrated. So finally, in the third month at this point, he says, well, David, if you wanted the media to call you every time something happened in your space, you've got to keep doing what you're doing, but you need to add one more thing. I'm like, dude, you're killing me now, He was very gracious. I loved him dearly. But basically he said, if anything happened in your business space, who would they want to go to? They already go into some people, the person needs to be you. He says it can change your life. He said, but you've got to keep doing what you're doing to earn that, but you need to add one more thing to make sure you get it. And at this point, I'm like stir crazy. So he finally dropped the bomb on me. He said, David, you need to write a book. And I was like, me, high school, barely passed high school, dropped out of college, I've got nothing to say. Who in the world would want to listen to me? He said, trust me, you've got to write a book. So I literally laughed out loud. I hope I wasn't too disrespectful, but Jay was a very gracious man. He kind of calmed me down and helped me realize that I was already creating content. I already had enough information that I could share, and even if it was just very minute to me and my business, it could be valuable to others, but certainly could be valuable to me as well. So I ended up writing a book. Didn't realize that was a hard thing to do. And I ended up getting it published. He basically sat down with me and said, hey, write down 10 things that you wish you could share with somebody before they got up and ran out the door. I'm like, well, I could probably do 3. But I ended up getting to about 10 things. And ended up getting the book published, reached out, and I guess the timing was right. I ended up getting it published by a New York house. Didn't realize that was a really hard thing to do. And it worked. Literally, in less than 8 months, I doubled my income as a banker. And I literally did everything that Jay said. I doubled all my fees, and nobody negotiated with me anymore. And sure enough, those clients that were those big agents and big builders for me in the business started to knock on my door. Of course, I swallowed my pride because I wanted to take their money, because I wanted to say, I don't think so. Anyhow, so I started getting those clients, and then sure enough, the media called me here locally weekly on something that was going on in the banking business. As you guys may remember, the 90s and early 2000s was like a roller coaster for banking. It ended up all crashing and burning. But it was good for me because weekly I was in the media, whether it was on television or radio, and sometimes print. I was the only local Yahoo who had a book about the banking side. And of course, my book was more consumer-driven than business-driven, but I was the only person in the area that had that authority, if you will, to talk about it. It was amazing. It was actually laughable. But the publishing process was one of the worst experiences I had ever gone through, which was not fun. I lost all control of my content, which is a little bit scary. I made a little bit of money, but I had no control or input over anything that actually happened with the book. When I actually got the book, those months later, I didn't like the cover, I didn't like the title, and I discovered that they added 3 chapters to the book after I turned my text in. It's like, oh my gosh, it was good, but it wasn't me. And I had to learn that stuff, and sure enough, I would get questions on, what did you think about chapter 3? I'm like, huh? I didn't write chapter 3. Oh wait, let me tell you. It was just not a fun experience. And of course, when the book came out, the publisher was just standing on my shoulders to sell more. And it's like, wait, I want to sell books because it's a fun thing to do, but I'm making stupid money over here. The nickel I make on the book doesn't mean anything to me, with all due respect, but they were still screaming at me. But I had to put up with it. But it worked so well, I became very passionate about guerrilla marketing, because the 2 things that Jay taught me was, 1, I was doing the right thing, and if I could leverage the out-of-the-box, unconventional aspects of the guerrilla marketing with the power of the book and the authority that the book brought me, that certainly would change my life. Ended up convincing Jay to write a second book with me. And he said yes, and my second book was a book called Guerrilla Marketing for Mortgage Brokers. It was very specific. And it was really probably more of a business book for the banking side than it was on how to sell a mortgage, but it was a lot of fun. Ended up selling 40,000 copies to the bank I worked for, which kind of created a strange dichotomy with my bosses who were required to read my book. So I ended up quitting that job after a while. But the book was an amazing tool for me. Now, granted, I did have to talk about the book. I did have to let people know that the book was out there, but it wasn't about me trying to sell a book. And today, more than ever, nobody wants to buy your product. Nobody wants to buy a book. You have to earn the right to buy the book. The book gave me the authority for them to want to, back then, to talk to me. But even still, they didn't want to buy the book, so you have to create value. And once you got to the point where you could, have them fall in love with you, because it's no longer know, like, and trust. It's know, love, and trust today. But the book kind of opened that door. It was they already knew who I was. They already knew that I was an authority, so they would listen to whatever I said, which gave me the ability to charge more and negotiate less, which was very powerful. Ended up quitting after about 2004 when I started the publishing company in 2003 because I thought the publishing business was a little bit broken. Even with my second book with Guerrilla Marketing for Mortgage Brokers, even with Jay on as a co-author who had sold at that point, like I said, over 15 million copies of his last book, it was still a miserable process. I didn't have any input. We had very little input in the book itself other than the original text. They wouldn't let us use certain words in the book. Has anybody ever heard of the internet? It started around 40 years ago, but it was pretty popular in the 90s, right? We were all using email. Well, they wouldn't let us use the word internet in our book because it was too much of a fad, or it was like that publisher is now out of business. So imagine that. But it really did work. So what I wanted to share with you guys today, do I have another hour left, or are we good on time? So what I wanted to share with you guys is, yes, you've got to keep doing what you're doing because obviously you're successful because you're still in business and hopefully you're having fun, but you've got to think outside of the box. Not just from a guerrilla marketing perspective. I'm always a big fan of providing value and adding service and caring about what other people get out of your product or service, whether you're selling a widget or teaching them something or trying to recruit donors for your nonprofit. You've got to be able to think about how they're going to benefit from knowing you. And a book is a great way. I don't want to call it a business card because that's being overused today. You see a lot of people publishing books that have got nothing in there, no content. All it does is tell them how wonderful they are, but you've got to have some content. But the book can be definitely leveraged if you do it right. So I want all of you guys to be able to learn how to charge more and negotiate less. Think about the things that you know very well, that's specifically you, or things that you've learned that you can spin to call yourself, and maybe consider putting a book together. And then you never know. You might be able to charge more and negotiate less for your services or rise above the rest of your competition because you're now the go-to person. Of course, you still have to have your product knowledge. You still have to know everything about your competition. You still have to do due diligence as a good marketer in your business. But the book is an amazing platform to stand on so that you're rising above everybody else to be able to add value and work with people that would never maybe give you time of day, or be able to earn what you're worth, which I don't think we can ever really do, but you can certainly get your path to getting there. So hopefully that helps a little bit. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk a little bit deeper. God's got a sense of humor, so I've got a really interesting path of how I started from way back when to the publishing side, but we're having a lot of fun. We've now been doing this for 14 years. Our focus is on business people who can leverage a book to grow their business. Now, as a publisher, we have to sell books to make money. But one of the biggest things I learned was the more successful our authors are, or our business people are, or our entrepreneurs are, the more successful that we're going to be. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Hopefully that helps a little bit with you guys.